Hello, everyone, and welcome. You have made it to the last breakout session of Summit. I can't believe you're still here. Amazing. I'm really, really excited about this talk. I've loved to get to know Ian. I think we spend so much of even this conference asking ourselves, how can we do this, and what does it take to do this? And I think Ian and his team at Intuit have the great privilege of helping their Agile teams determine if they should do something, if they should go after this functionality or use this practice. I think it's something we can all learn from, and with that, please help me in welcoming Ian.
Actually, Max, if you mind just stay here for a second. So I just wanted to call out Max here. Max is the Agile track lead for this conference, and I've been working with him for quite some time. He has been at this for months, and so this is really the culmination of a lot of effort for him. And by the way, he has a day job. So I'd like to just, give a round of applause to Max for all that work. All right, thanks, man. All right, so let me just grab this. So welcome. If you are here for Designing for Agile Delight, you're in the right place. If you're not, you can awkwardly glance around and sneak out the back. Don't worry about it, but we hope you stay. I'm going to jump into this. Hopefully this is the button. I am Ian Maple. I'm the enterprise leader at Intuit, and I would like to share a little bit about myself with you. Why? Because if you remember back, some of you may have attended some of the earlier sessions about making a social connection. I think that's important. I want you to trust me, and I want you to know a little bit about me, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. Now, if you notice the slight accent, that's because, like Atlassian, I am from down under, but specifically, I'm from New Zealand. Now, that's the one with the Kiwis, not the kangaroos. And if you're wondering where it is, it's down there. So you had no idea you were going to get a cultural and geography lesson here. This thing here, this little fairy thing, that's a kiwi. People are also kiwis. This is not a kiwi. If you go to New Zealand, that is a kiwi fruit. Be careful what you order at breakfast. All right? So there we go, kiwi. Okay, so I started my career as a developer. And somewhere along the way of my career, something went horribly wrong. Found myself in management, leading engineering teams and organizations around the world. And I'd like to say that over the course of that journey, I have lived 4 Agile lives. First Agile life was really as a developer, knowing what it feels like to go into the office, sit down with the customer, show them the software I'd written yesterday, make those changes based on their feedback, show them again the next day. That's a rapid iteration. Absolutely powerful. Second one was leading an engineering Agile transformation globally. So across 7 development sites in 5 countries, leading from a not Agile state to an Agile state. I'd love to tell you that all went super smoothly. Ask me later how it really went. The third one is working in an organization which is really rocking it with Agile. You may have worked with some of those teams and organizations. When they're getting it right, they're operating at light speed, and it feels amazing. So I know what that feels like. The last one is where I am today, dealing with a large-scale enterprise. I'm the Enterprise Agile leader for Intuit, and we have many, many teams, all in different places, different stages of their development, and that's what I'm kind of dealing with today. All right, so that's a bit about me. Now let's just do a little pulse about you. What I'd like you to do is just answer this question for me. How well does your organization deal with Agile? Now, fist of 5. Fist of 5 means I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, show me, and you're going to hold up and show everybody how well your organization feels about Agile. Now, if you think, with innovation, if you feel that it's really doing well, it's a 5 or a 4. If you feel not so good about it, it might be a 0 or a 1, and depending on how you feel about it, pick your finger carefully. Now, let's do that. So 1, 2, 3, show those fingers. Now just glance around, get a sense of who's around you. Now, if you see anybody holding up 5 fingers next to you, just spend the next 40 minutes talking to them instead, right? Because you'll probably get more out of it. Okay, thank you for doing that. If you're not familiar with Intuit, you may be familiar with some of our products. TurboTax, I hope you're also gearing up for the next few days on that one. And QuickBooks are our primary products. We also have giant robots. Difficult to explain, but trust me, they're awesome. We are a cool company, right? We are, well known for being a great place to work. But today, what I really want to talk about is our reputation for innovation, right? We have a reputation for having a pretty innovative style, and that's what we're going to explore today. Now, rather than me just sort of go through it with you step by step, I thought I'd take you on a little journey to solve a problem. Now, this particular problem is related to the Intuit Agile program. So as Enterprise Agile Leader, this is the thing that I own in Intuit. So you're coming on my problem, so thank you for that. A little bit about Intuit Agile. We've been doing Agile for over 10 years, since 2007. Hundreds of teams in the company doing Agile. And we implement Agile in many, many different ways. There isn't a one-size-fits-all, and we implement a customized playbook. But fundamentally, though, we're rallying around the 12 Agile principles, right? More importantly, though, we are aiming towards these 6 outcomes. So we're focusing our efforts towards those outcomes, and we wrap all that up into this Intuit Agile program. So this is the vision statement of Intuit Agile: deliver world-class agility through enterprise-wide adoption of the Agile principles. And what we mean by that is, yes, we're going to embrace these 12 Agile principles. We're going to back those 12 Agile principles up with hundreds of Agile practices. So this is your daily stand-ups and your user stories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But more importantly, we're going to take those practices and we're going to map those to how well they support the so-called agility outcomes. All right? And that is what's important. The practices are only in support to the outcomes. So those agility outcomes are essentially the business outcomes, and so they support the organization's True North goals. And so this is how we kind of map the Agile as the engine of the organization. Okay, so what's the problem? Well, the problem is that I said we're going to deliver world-class agility. Right? Now, when we talk about world-class agility, we talk about and think about an Agile maturity spectrum. That Agile maturity spectrum starts over here with not Agile. Right? Now, eventually, we might convince them to start doing Agile. They move into a doing Agile state. They're going through the motions. They got the Scrum book. They read page 7. It says do a daily stand-up, so they do a daily stand-up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, later on, as they start to get practiced at the Agile practices, they'll start to mix and match and experiment with them, and they realize why they were doing it in the first place, and they're embracing the spirit of it. And those teams are starting to approach what we call being Agile. And that's a really great state to be. There isn't even an elite state beyond that we call beyond Agile. And beyond Agile teams are the ones you go and talk to, and they'll spend an hour talking about how they talk to their customer every day. They release their software 100 times a day. They are super, super Agile, but during that conversation, they never use the word Agile, Scrum, Sprint, Scrum Master, etc. Right? They move beyond Agile because they're so Agile. Now, I don't know where world-class agility is, but I know it's over to the right somewhere. Which begs the question, which is, well, where is Intuit today? Right? Where are all my hundreds of teams? That's not really where they are, by the way. So that's a problem, and it begs the question, which is, how Agile are we? Now, the good news there is that we have ways to look at that. We have maturity assessments, very similar to the Atlassian sort of health check kind of thing, in a little bit more detail at the practice and principle level, so we can assess that. We also have, this is more of a qualitative approach, we have the quantitative approach where we look at metrics and we build up these metric hierarchies, starting with those outcomes as the primary metric, looking at the practices that support that and the metrics that support that. And we can build up these kind of pictures to help our teams embrace their journey. And so, cool, well, that's all good. That just shows that we have world-class agility, right? Well, unfortunately, we are not there yet. Many of our teams have not reached that elite state, and the data shows that, and the qualitative assessment shows that. So, how can we help our teams with this problem? Now, given that we have a reputation for innovation at Intuit, why don't we apply Intuit's innovation process to this problem? Now, Intuit's innovation process is known as Design for Delight, or you may hear me refer to it as D4D. So let's talk a little bit about D4D. D4D has 3 main components: deep customer empathy, go broad to go narrow, and rapid experimentation with customers. At the heart of that, we consider is delight, right? We can sort of go through those loops. So let's sort of unpack that a little bit. Let's go to deep customer empathy. Deep customer empathy really is about know your customer better than they know themselves, right? Deep customer empathy. Now, rather than sort of go through the theory of it, I thought I'd just show you some of the tools that we bring to bear on this. So one of the ones that we bring to bear is this customer safari. Now, customer safari literally means that we go visit the customer, go to their location, watch them in the wild, right? It's not bring them in and sort of go through some sort of interview process with them. We want to observe them. And we want to observe specific activities. Don't just call up your customer and say, hey, can I come and watch you? A bit creepy. So don't do that. But you want to watch them use the product or pay an invoice or pay their payrolls, etc. So as you're doing this, as you're watching them, you're exploring, you're asking questions, you're observing them, and sort of asking, why are you frustrated? What's going on here? You seem very agitated, etc., etc. You're trying to explore that to clarify what you're seeing. As you go through that, we encourage, obviously, note-taking, photographs if you're going to go and observe a customer. Again, don't just whip out your camera. Ask them if it's okay, or ask them if it's okay if you take a few photos. But that can tell a powerful story as you do the debrief later on. But at the bottom of this, what we're looking for are things that surprise us, right? Because surprises are what reveal those insights. Right? And usually these are keyed in with the emotional states, right? So I'm really frustrated, I'm really angry, this is awesome, I love this, is going to really tell you where some areas you want to focus on. So an insight changes the way we think about our opportunity, the customer, and the world around us. All right? So this is kind of one of the ways that we go after and get deep customer empathy with the customer. So when you go in and do one of these things, here's some things to keep in mind. Be a dummy, so don't go in there as the expert and be sort of judgmental about it. Pretend that you've never paid payroll or used an invoice or done any of that stuff, even if you're a super expert. Don't forget about those clarifying questions. If you see somebody like thumping their fist on the desk, and you don't ask why, you might not get any insight out of that. Definitely don't judge or suggest, right? You're a tourist. You're there to observe, not to suggest. If they are using your product completely wrong, don't go, oh, that's silly, don't do that, do this. You missed the point. The point is that they didn't know about that, or they chose not to use your product that way. Don't forget to be present and actively listen. So listening isn't just about with your ears, you're watching them. You're watching the body language, you're looking for that emotional state. That's, again, really where the insights can be hiding. And don't forget, it's not about you. Right? Don't sit there going, oh, well, this is not how the product is supposed to be used, or da-da-da-da. It's really their world, their perceptions, their use of the product, all right? So that's what you're trying to understand. All right, so that's just one of the tools that we use in deep customer empathy. And at the end of the deep customer empathy phase, what we're trying to do is arrive at a set of customer problem statements. Now, customer problems statements are in this format. They start off with I am, the customer persona, right? So we're essentially trying to sort of make sure that we're trying to identify the customer early on with a customer persona. I'm trying to achieve some sort of result, but I've encountered some sort of problem and barrier because of the root cause of that, the 5 whys. And don't forget about the emotion, which makes me feel this emotion, right? If you can't tie it to an emotion, it might just be that's interesting, but it really isn't where the insight is hiding. Okay, so that's enough about the generics of it. Let's get back to my problem, because I like to talk about those. So we're not there yet. Now, this is the Intuit Agile program. Now, when we talk about the suite of products, this is like my suite of products. Charter and leadership is kind of how we govern the program. The blue boxes are kind of like the products and services of the Intuit Agile program. So the training and the coaching and the tools and metrics and all that stuff. And we back that up with the Agile content, the Agile communities, our preferred partners, and external Agile, which is actually what I'm doing here today. All right, so we decided that we're going to focus in on one of our customer problems that was related to the coaching product. All right? Now, the problem is this. I have this many teams at Intuit, and I have actually less than this many coaches. Right? And there isn't really enough coaches to deal with the problems. So the problem statement as translated from that is something like this. I'm an Agile team at Intuit, so my customers are internal customers. I'm trying to deliver those outcomes using Agile, right? It's about the outcomes, not about the Agile. But some of our Agile practices leave a lot to be desired, and we're not making forward progress. Because, in this case, we do not have access to Agile coaching, which makes me feel frustrated and not supported by my organization and my leadership. All right, so this is the problem statement that we started with. Okay, so then let's go broad to go narrow, the second phase of design for delight. Now, in this case, I'd rather that, instead of me explaining it, let's try it. Right? We'll keep this a little interactive. But at the end of this is, we want to get to one great idea to start with. In order to do that, we've got to look at lots of ideas. And so in our little exercise here, we are going to try and solve a problem. So I am an Atlassian Summit attendee, should resonate with some of you. I am trying to attend this session and have an enjoyable experience, but, all right, I got too many options. I want to attend it all, and I can only go to one. I couldn't find the room. Might add, I had to walk a long way to get there. I can't find my friends. Maybe the session was full when I got there. Or one I talked about yesterday with a colleague was the lunch line is incredibly long. There must be a better way. All right? So whichever one of those problems resonates with you, I would like to explore that. So we're going to work as a team to do this. So what I want you to do is to form a team of 3 or 4 people. So make awkward eye contact around. Make a friend, and I want you, as that group of 3, to choose one of those ideas. All right, so choose one of those ideas, or pick one of the ones that I mentioned, and you've got 30 seconds to do that. So make that social connection, introduce yourselves, pick an idea. All right, don't be shy. This is your last chance to make a new friend before the end of the conference. So let's do that. Do a bit of networking. Okay, everybody good? You good? Good? All right. So now you've got your new team. You've made a social connection, hopefully, and now you're already a high-performing team in waiting. So what we're going to do now is we are going to generate tons and tons of ideas to solve this problem. Now, I'm only going to give you 60 seconds to do this, all right? But I'll tell you a little bit about this. So what we want you to do is to think of an idea. Right, just some, I got the lunch line's too long. What if we had round tables instead of square tables? Something like that. And I want you to just to say it. Say it to your teammates. Now, your teammates, they're also thinking of their ideas, but they're going to listen, right? Now, the main thing about this is I want you to listen, and as you're listening to this idea, think about the yes and, right? Well, hey, that's an interesting idea, but what if we added this? So here's my new idea based on your idea. Now, as a result of that, wild ideas are fine, right? So you might come up with something crazy, like what if we teleported lunch in, right? And that might go, yeah, but what if we brought it in by drone? Or what if we did, Now, don't judge the ideas. Don't say, oh, that's a stupid idea. Or, nah, that's not going to work, right? This is about quantity. Generate, okay? So think about that, and don't forget to keep count. All right, so we'll see how many you can generate. So here we go, 60 seconds, start generating those ideas to solve your problem. Let's go. Okay, so stop there. That was 60 seconds. It may have seemed like a lifetime for some of you. Let's do a little debrief of that. So, first of all, hands up if you got to at least 5 ideas. 5 ideas. Quite a few of you. How about 10? Keep your hands up if you got to 10. Oh, got some 10s over there. Anybody more than that? 15? You want to get a 15? 10's pretty good in 60 seconds. That's an idea every 6 seconds. Right, now imagine if I'd given you like 10 minutes to do that, right? How many ideas you could have come up with to solve this problem. Okay, so the idea here is about generate lots of ideas. Anybody want to admit to having the craziest idea? Just yell it out. A large screen for? Oh, live streaming for your teammates, so they don't have to find you. You can just, yeah, great, love it. What else? Teleporting yourself from session to session. I love it. All right. Did you guys build on top of that idea? Anybody can sort of move to maybe closer to a real idea? All right. So, but this idea, this is fine, right? Like we want to hear those crazy ideas because it gets people kind of rethinking the perspective and the framework of how they can come up with ideas. Anything? I think I heard run really well, which is the live stream one to improve sessions. Anybody else got anything? Unfortunately, the future sessions are a bit limited at this point, being the last session. How about anything we could do to improve this session? Feel free to say, Ian, you could just talk faster and shut up so we can go to the party. Anything? Okay, because I'm always looking for that feedback. Right, so if you think of anything, just yell it out. All right, but the idea here is we've got all these ideas. 10 ideas, and if we added them up across all the different problems, we've got a ton of ideas in 1 minute. The question now is, well, where do we go with that, right? How do we start? How do we know which one we're going to start with? So the second part of go broad to go narrow is go narrow. So this is where we're going to zone in on one of those ideas. And I'm going to show you another one of these tools. This one's called 2x2 narrowing. And 2x2 narrowing essentially just says, take all your ideas, and start putting some word pairs on axes like this, right? So this idea is going to help the number of people it'll help. This idea is easy to implement, hard to implement. So those are the sorts of axes you're going to do. And you're going to do this a few times until something starts to emerge, but you'll start with some pairs, and then you'll place the ideas. Write them on a Post-it note, stick them on that grid somewhere relative to the other ideas. Now the ideas that are drifting up to the top right are probably the ones that you're going to start with. And then you can take those top right ones and start putting them onto other 2x2 grids until you start to see 1 or 2 ideas emerge, and you might even boil those down. Now this is just one of the ways you can do this. There are other ways. You can hand everybody $1,000 and say, here, spend this money on the ideas and see which one gets the most money. Lots of different ways. But the point here is that we're trying to narrow in on one idea. Now, it doesn't mean the other ideas are bad and we're going to abandon them. It's just we need to start with one of them. Okay, so now we're starting to get into our one idea. Now, I'd like to talk to you about the idea that we came up with to solve my problem. Now, the way that we applied this idea was during innovation days. This is one of the ways that Intuit applies its innovation model. In this case, we take one of our business units, they take all their teams offline for 3 days every quarter, and it's called Innovation Days. And we ran this idea through this Innovation Days cycle. So remember this problem, we don't have enough coaches, and we have lots of teams. Well, we do have something here. What we have is a lot of teams. Now, some of those teams are good at things, and some of them are not so good at Agile things. And on the flip side, some of them are better at other things, and so on and so forth. And the idea sort of emerged through this exercise of, what if we could actually get them to coach each other? All right? So, thus was born the idea Agile Cupid, inter-team Agile dating, so to speak. Now, this Agile Cupid idea, we then applied through the D4D cycle. And this tool that you're looking up in the top right is called the Next tool, but the boxes that you see down the bottom are essentially just pieces of it. So that'll be up there somewhere, and so on and so forth. So we start with the customer. These are our Scrum Masters and our Agile team members. We start with that problem that we had, and then we go to that idea or that proposed solution that we have, which is to have them coach each other. Now, What we have to do now is rapidly experiment to see whether this idea is valid. So measuring what they do is better than listening to what they say. So what that means is we start with the leap of faith assumption. Now, a leap of faith assumption has to be something that is an incredibly risky assumption. If it's false, your idea is invalid, and it has to be new to the world. So don't just say, oh man, we have to make this massive assumption that people are willing to buy things online. Well, yeah, but that's already proven in the world, right? That's not really a leap of faith assumption, that's a big assumption, all right? So just the leap of faith ones that are new to the world that keep us awake at night. So in this case, we identified two primary ones to start with. One, teams recognize that they have a weakness, and more importantly, they're willing to be coached by not an Agile coach, but by another Scrum Master or another team. Second is, teams have a strength in some Agile practices, and they'd be willing to coach another team, the so-called supply and demand equation. All right? So then we move from a leap of faith assumption and we formulate a hypothesis. The hypothesis says that if we do something, they're going to behave in a certain way. In this case, if we ask the Scrum Masters, do you have an Agile opportunity area, and would you be willing to be coached by another Intuit Scrum Master, not an Agile coach, then at least 50% of them would commit to do it. Now notice it does not say, would say yes. No surveys. Right? It is not a commitment if they just say, yeah, that's a great idea. You should explore that. Right? What we're looking for is currency. Now, the currency could actually be money. Right? If you go and show somebody your mobile app and they say, hey, that's an amazing app, and like, great, it's coming out next week. If you give me the $5 now, I'll send it to you. Then you'll find out if your app is a really awesome app or not. Right? If they fork over the $5, they're really going to do that. Now, you don't need to get cash from them. What you can do is get something that they wouldn't normally give up or normally do. So it could be their phone number, their address, their email address, their credit card number that you wouldn't give up to somebody unless you were serious about this idea. So in this case, we had to get some currency for our hypothesis. And that's where we move into the experiment. So we designed an experiment to address the hypothesis. In this case, we went out to the Scrum Masters. Apparently, they spend a lot of time around the water cooler there at Intuit, and our researchers are all stick figures, so that's just how that works. We took the script to them and said, hey, are you a Scrum Master? Yes, I am. Hey, do you have some Agile area you're really good at? And, yeah, we rock at retrospectives. Oh, okay, would you be willing to coach another team? And they're like, yeah. Do I have currency? No, I just surveyed them, right? So then we said, oh great, I have a team that really is needing some help with the retrospectives. I'm going to set up a meeting next week, and I'm going to send you an invite to that meeting. You okay with that? Yep. Okay, so we sent them the invite, and the currency was if they accepted the meeting. Now, I don't think that was the best currency. What would be a better currency? They turned up to the meeting, right? Now, we actually did hold those meetings, and they did turn up. So luckily it was that, but we were under the Innovation Days time constraint, so we didn't have a chance to do that. But yes, absolutely. A real currency means they showed up to the meeting. So we did that. We ran that experiment, and we agreed that the currency was that they accepted the invite. They didn't just ignore it. So what did we learn from that? We ran that experiment, we went out and talked to a whole bunch of the Scrum Masters across our campus in Mountain View, and we found that 80% of the Scrum Masters accepted a meeting to coach another team. Right? They were willing to show up and help another team in an area of need. On the supply side, 75% accepted a meeting it was the other way around. They accepted a meeting to get coaching 80%, 75% would turn up and coach another team. Now, we only wanted 50, so then we move on to the decision about this leap of faith assumption in this experiment. Do we pivot and change our idea, or do we keep going? Now, we have demand, we have supply. The answer is we keep going. We persevere, right? And this is, again, the lean startup. If you know Eric Ries in his book, this is what this is all about. Now, the next thing we have to do is move on to the remaining leap of faith assumptions, if we have any. And we identified a couple of extra ones. The next leap of faith assumption was we can identify which team is good at what, and we can expose that in a way that's easy for self-service. right? Now, because if either of those things are false, then I don't have time to go around the company and talk to hundreds of teams about hundreds of practices every week and then kind of refresh that somewhere. So we had to validate this. So rather than talk about the next experiment, this is where we're now going to move into the prototype. Now, when we talk about prototyping, we usually think in terms of these sort of 5 levels of prototype, and there could be more. The first one is what you see in the picture. What if we could just sketch it on a piece of paper? Right, the simplest possible thing. Now there's online tools that you can use to fake up an interface and that kind of stuff. You can use those as well. But literally grabbing a pen and a piece of paper and drawing your app on a piece of paper and then getting a customer in there and sliding them the screens and saying, use my app. Don't tell them how to do it, just slide it to them and see what they do is pretty powerful to tell you whether you're on the right track or not. Right? We can also fake it, right? We can build something that's hard-coded or not real, or part of it is not real. We can do it manually, so they think it's a system, but it's actually somebody on the other end of the phone, rushing off to do something. We could do a technical test, or we can move all the way to a full A/B test. Right? Now, a full A/B test is where a lot of people think prototyping lives. We're going to spend the next 6 months building a prototype. Right? And we'll deploy it into production and we'll compare the data, and yeah, you can do that. But wouldn't it be better to find that out today that this is not going to work? Is anybody familiar with Google Glass? Little glasses, yeah. How long do you think it took from the first time they came up with an idea for the idea of Google Glass until they released the first prototype of Google Glass? What do you think? Just yell it out. 6 months. Anybody else? 6 weeks, 2 years. The answer is 4 hours. The first prototype of Google Glass was a coat hanger wrapped around somebody's head with a pair of tights, women's, what do you call those tights, stretched over the little wireframe with a mini projector projecting into the person's eye line. Right? They were testing the color of the interface, and they found out they'd chosen the wrong color in 4 hours. Okay? So this is what we're talking about. Do the simplest thing possible. Now, this is the Agile Cupid prototype. Some of you may recognize that. We did it in Confluence, right? We wrote some scripts. We pulled some data out of Jira to look at some of those practice metrics. We found some numbers. Those aren't the real numbers or teams, but we threw that into a Confluence table. And the idea was that if a team wanted to improve their predictability, they'd come here. They'd see the top teams in the top teams in the company. Okay. Here, and the numbers. And by the way, these are links. Those links take them to that team's Jira board, right? And we actually found an interesting side effect. The side effect was that if they clicked the team's Jira board, they didn't need to talk to the team at all. They could learn a whole bunch just by looking at the team's Jira board, right? So that was, a nice passive side effect to the prototype, right? And literally all of this is happening in that 3-day window, in that 3-day innovation window. Okay, so that was the problem that we solved, or it's still working on solving. Cool, innovation's amazing. Now what? Where do we go from here? Well, where we go from here is integration with Agile. If you just sort of leave innovation off to the side, that's useful. Innovation Days is a great example of that. But at some point, we want to talk about Agile and integration and how we integrate that. Now, if you're starting the innovation journey, if you're a 1 or a 0 at the beginning of this, that's okay. You can leave innovation off to the side. Create your white space days, your innovation days, have a period where the team sort of steps away and does innovation cycles. But at the end of the day, we really want to ask the question, which is, what if innovation was fundamentally the way that we did things, right? It's not Agile over there, innovation over here. Now, if you're thinking that we just abandon epics and stories and we just start doing nothing but ideas and hypotheses and experiments, that's not really how this works. Right? Both are needed. We have a balance here, and we have to have user stories and experiments. Now, when I would choose to do an experiment versus a user story is, do I have a leap of faith assumption? If I have a leap of faith assumption, I should start doing some experiments first, right? Build some prototypes. Once I've validated that, I've removed my leap of faith assumptions, then I can move into user stories and do more traditional stuff. Okay? Now, if you're on this end of the spectrum, and all teams can move on the spectrum, over here, I'm exploring a new area, I'm probably going to have more experiments. At the other end of the spectrum, we have more compliance and regulation, and those guys are going to have more user stories. Good example of this for Intuit is our tax teams, TurboTax, right? Oh, the government wants a new 1040 form. Let's experiment. See what the best 1040 form is. No, we're going to have to do it, right? So they're going to have user stories, but they can experiment with the interface and cool new technologies, all right? Both are needed. We want to see our teams kind of somewhere on the spectrum, but not all user stories. Okay, we also apply this at multiple altitudes. So we have 5 altitudes of Agile, down at the 24 hours and tasks. We're coming up into that traditional sprint and stories. Now we'll start to see experiments alongside stories. Go up to the epics at the quarterly backlog. We're seeing those leap of faith assumptions alongside our core epics, ideas alongside initiatives, and really all of that is in support of the strategic priorities of the company, right? Our Agile implementation, Intuit Agile, covers all of those altitudes. To give you an example of that, and I'm sorry I don't have an actual Jira screenshot here, so just pretend this is a Jira screenshot, but literally on the team's Jira boards, they can create experiment. We have an experiment issue type that has the fields that support experimentation, hypothesis formats, etc., and they can put those onto their board. So in a traditional sprint, they're going to be doing things like this. They are going to, I've got to stop hitting the wrong button here. They are going to be doing the experiments, moving them into in progress, getting them done alongside the stories in priority order. Okay, so here's the bottom line. Bottom line is, if you are starting this innovation journey, find a place for it to start. Grab a couple of hours. If you can't organize a 3-day thing, spend one of your retrospectives or take one of those time slots and do some of this innovation. I don't know, what it's going to look like for you. Eventually, you are going to start to think about how to integrate it. Make it part of how you work is really important. What works for Intuit? Yeah, this stuff works for Intuit. It may not work for you. All right? What you should do is figure out what works for your teams and give it a go. Right? Just try it. It's an idea. It's an experiment in and of itself. And I might try and phrase it a different way, and that is, how about you innovate on your innovation? Try some of these D4D cycles on your innovation process and see if you can find out what works for you. Okay, thank you. I think we've got a couple of minutes for questions. So ask me anything. If you can't catch me today, feel free to ping me up later on LinkedIn. Thank you. Okay.
Here you go.